Hey everybody, thank you for the support so far. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment. I would love to hear from everybody and what they think of the series. If you would like to support me further, in the links in the description, there are several of them to my blog, to my social media, but also to Amazon as well. Pick up a copy of Hyper-Borea in paperback or on Kindle. The Kindle edition is $2.99. I would love to see some reviews, 5-star reviews. That would help me out a ton. I appreciate you guys. Thank you very much. The sun rose, warm rays of orange cutting the black night into cool tones of blue. The suburban car, an impressive vehicle, was room enough for the 5 of us. Caleb had arrived dressed appropriately, his clothing stained in varying earth tones, hues that he called camouflage. He would blend in well with his surroundings in a landscape dominated by brush and shrub trees. The group mocked him for his attire, but he earned my praise. The faces around me were slightly sunken, all clearly unused to waking at dawn. The vehicle crawled through relatively quiet streets until it accelerated down a descent and onto what was called a freeway. I gripped the handle of my door and the scrawny arm of Caleb. The vehicle accelerated to a speed over 60 miles per hour, a speed that would surely kill us all, were Kyle to suffer a misfortune. I relaxed, with time passing and a doom not falling upon us. So, Mr. Sovos, what are we going to do once we get to Sedona? Kyle asked from the driver's position. I suppose it is time to discuss plans. I adjusted my shirt, confident now that we would not perish in the vehicle. First, we must discover the location of a burial ground, one of an ancient person with which I can commune and discern the object of my journey. Can you say that again in English? Sean asked. A pause on my part, not knowing where the confusion lay. This territory of Sedona, the land of red rocks. It was not always inhabited by your city-state, correct? I decided to start with what the group knew to be true on this topic. Yes, Sylvia replied. Native Americans used to live all over the state. Then the white people came from Spain in the east and forced them into reservations. Now, hold on. Caleb held up his hand now. Not all white people. He laughed to himself, then realized the group was not in the mood for his antics. Sorry, he apologized. So likely I must find the corpse of one of the slaughtered peoples and find where his tribe hid their artifact when the invaders conquered them. Ancient Indian burial ground doesn't exactly come up on Google Maps, Kyle said. Yeah, Sean echoed. How will we find a body? Won't the bones be missing too if they've been dead that long? I do not need a full corpse to commune with the spirit, just an imprint of personage, a space where something significant happened to an individual of an emotional nature, perhaps a killing, raping, burial, or a childbirth, just so long as the person related to the event is dead. Died having a baby? Caleb furrowed his eyebrows in contemplation. No, they did not have to pass during the act, just as long as they are dead, and I'm at the location that the baby... Okay, we get it, Sylvia interrupted me. As I was saying, I continued, I must speak to a spirit. Then we will have the location of an artifact. Most artifacts are guarded, so I may need to collect ingredients before breaking the charm or curse. Then I will have it, and we may hunker down until the next full moon. Will it be that easy? Sean asked. Sounds more like a treasure hunt than an epic quest, Caleb agreed. Well, my voice trailed off as I glanced out the window. We were leaving the city, the buildings and artificial landscaping giving way to desert foliage, dirt, and rocks. I think I may have been pursued. Cormal? Sean's voice stuttered. No. How much did I warn them? I did not wish to scare off my subordinates before we had even begun our mission. Gilruel, Cormal's witch wife. Isn't that the lady you were telling us about that can raise the dead and make us into zombies? Caleb was tense. I read his mind. I didn't sign up to be some fat lady's pool boy. Shh, I soothed Caleb. She only seeks servants for violent ends. Oh, thank God. He brushed a hand over his forehead. I recalled my dream, the tavern and the blood, the windmill and the witch. Gilruel would never face me personally. I would obliterate her. It is most likely that she has under her command several slaves with which she will assault us. I should have brought my dad's gun. Caleb shook his head. What are you saying, Kyle? We can't kill anyone, Sylvia protested. Yeah, we'll all go to jail. What are we going to tell them? They were mind-controlled by a witch? It was Sean then. Leave the slaying to me, children. The only reason I have equipped you with weapons is for your own self-defense. This order would also keep them from screwing anything up accidentally. The environment was slowly changing as we conversed. We had tracked uphill, the desert transforming into dry grasslands. The views of the distance as well as close mountains were stunning, and I should like to make this journey on foot or by wing someday. Unfortunately, I had not time to gaze. Besides, a projectile is not effective against a mind-controlled opponent. They would not register the pain. Their minds have been melted, and they no longer feel as we do. Did he just say their minds were melted? Kyle asked. Crippling their limbs is most effective in staving them off. They will live to escape or be captured by authorities, and if captured, prove a perplexing victim, gravely wounded, yet driven to escape and rejoin their master. Fear not, Kyle, I assured. In order to fall into her mind spell, you must be touched by her. I shall not let that happen. I smiled and nodded to the reflection of his eyes in the mirror. Okay, talk to a spirit, find the artifact, avoid the witch, Sean summarized. It was true that Gilberelle would avoid me. She would elect to act upon a strategy that employed agents to overwhelm and slow me down. She had doubtless heard tale of my prowess in war. I chuckled to myself, a memory coming to me. It was a cool night in autumn. I found myself in my own quarters in the main campus of the King's College on the island of Yig. It was here that I occupied the finest apartment, high up among the castle's towers. Attached to my foyer sat an office space with a magnificent bay window that afforded views of the city, mountains, and the sea from an altitude at the top floor. I was twiddling a brass rod about my fingers in deep contemplation, when then came a knock at the door to the exterior hallway. The knock was moderate in intensity, but quick as if indicating excitement. It interrupted the quiet and broke my trance. Previously, the only sound in the room had been the occasional popping of dried sap in the wood-burning fireplace. I glanced out the window. It was dark. The mountains and forests deep blue silhouettes, the fire, the candles, and magical flares of the city twinkling. Last I had been conscious of my surroundings, it had still been night, the sun reflecting off the sea, and the call of the gulls distant but audible. "Come in," I called, channeling through the rod to unlock my door and disable some defensive wards I had cast earlier. In walked Clannis, meaning Rose Dawn. His robes, looking splendid, and his beautifully chiseled face without imperfection as usual. It was always a delight to look upon such a handsome fellow, such as he was. "Clannis, you wonderful stallion, what have you for me?" The Grand Master of A&P was grinning wide, his eyes hinting at something devious. "Lord Arcanist, Canero, Eagle Summer, Farstrider, has returned from far south and east, beyond the Spice Road. He has brought a most wondrous specimen." I stood, snapping my fingers. My bare feet were covered then by slippers, and my casual evening robe melted into a fine maroon vestment with padded shoulders. A matching tiara of the same color with a fine ruby focal point held back my long hair. A surprise to be sure. I had expected nothing to come of his latest trip beyond intelligence. I ushered him out the door, and was eager for him to lead me to Canero's whereabouts. We were all of the same mind in the School of Alchemy and Potions. Clannis's enthusiasm was surely rubbing off on me. We were both electric. Canero Farstrider had been absent more than half the year. What had he brought home? A specimen was what I was mentioned, but was it a man or beast? Something in between? Something of children's tales? Our footsteps clattered down the extensive stone hallways of the primary building on the campus. "He awaits your attendance in the yard." I could not counsel myself in patience any longer. "Then let us take the most expedient route afforded to us." I turned to the next window larger than an arrow slit, and with the flick of my hand unlocked and opened the two panels wide. "Off we go, Clannis." I gripped his arm and leapt out of the building, the Grand Master of Alchemy and Potions taking a moment to find his footing as we half walked and half floated on thin air. "Some warning, Lord Arcanist!" the Lesser Master squealed with a mixture of delight and fear as we drifted through the night and over the lower roofs and chimneys down to the ground floor. With my mind I steered us around the castle and toward the courtyard, where I saw assembled a small army of servants from Canero's expedition. Our robes gave a short flap, as did the flags and banners on the castle's walls, as a light breeze came over us. "There flies the Lord Arcanist!" shouted a master I did not recognize from this distance in these dark conditions. A couple of students were following the perimeter and casting flares, giving more light to the scene. Servants hurried into the castle with crates and barrels. Masters were huddled in their departmental cliques, whispering. I spotted the bull-like frame of Canero placed centrally in this rectangular yard, hundreds of footspans in length. I navigated us to him, as he stood next to a crate of the size to fit a horse. As my slippers found solid ground, the masters at the periphery constricted their orbit, eager to listen to the conversation between the returning master and the Lord Arcanist. "Master Canero, what a magnificent lot of treasures you have returned with." I paused, running my eyes over the dozens of packages, of many sizes, in the hands of what looked to be navy men. What could be the cause for this materially successful turn of events? I remember signing off on an intellectual venture, leaving on wings of a bird, but here you are, returned with men of the sea. I was not patronizing nor criticizing. I had known the Farstrider for some time, and he had never failed to surprise. In his deep voice came the answers to my questions.
"Lord Arcanist, you will be most pleased. I have jewels and gold for the college and the king's coffers. I have spices, beasts, and slaves. I have scrolls and tomes that contain languages and knowledge from far lands and distant seas." The barrel-chested robed wizard breathed deep, filling himself with pride, patting a meaty hand on the horse-sized crate. "But the most interesting prize is not what, but who."
He snapped, and the wood panels turned to dust, revealing an iron cage with a bound man at the center. He was sitting cross-legged. He wore rags, his hair obscured by a cloth wrap, his beard a goatee, black and braided. He was not elderly nor young. What details I could see of his face in this light were hollow cheeks, a hooked nose, and sunken eyes. "He radiates magic," I observed.
"The expedition had taken landfall in a river valley beyond the highest mountains on the Spice Road. We were to depart down the river following a lead about an ancient lost scroll when the inn was visited by a boatsman possessing a ring that had an aura. Initially, we thought it product of folk magic or a river witch, perhaps a traveling seeress. Through coercion in a private location and reading of his thoughts, we discerned that there lay an island downriver a week that housed a powerful mage."
Canero motioned to the man in rags, bound by a warded rope.
"He was well protected. We still don't know why. There didn't seem to be any other history of magic users in the area. His island was guarded from those with a talent, wards, shields, natural cataclysms such as whirlpools and beasts of land and the water. He was rich too. A small army patrolled his shores, and riverboats, armed with well-equipped archers, were quickly deployed at any sign of threat. We spent the better part of the month as an expedition separated, gathering ingredients and resources. It was cheaper for me to slay a local earl with the help of his rival than to buy him out. He apparently had some relationship with the mage. In return from the rival came the raising of an army. We spent another few weeks on rituals, calming nature and peeling back his wards and shields. Then the assault began. We taught the earl's men the might of siege weapons, and enhanced their bows and shields. One caster, though mighty, was no match for my 5. He was very well attuned with battle magics. In the end, we found the ring upon the boatsman's finger was made for communication. We found a few more rings like it. The level of craftsmanship required an artifact of which this mage had none in his castle. Most of the treasure in his vaults were jewels and gold taken as protection money from the local earldoms. He was well known in the area. Through writings and witness testimony, we believed he had slain his talented compatriots in the region, cornering the magic market, so to speak.
The 3 masters looked upon this foreign fellow for a moment. I was the first to break the silence. I addressed the prisoner. "If you cannot speak our language yet, you must not have traveled far beyond your home. You must not have had access to linguistic spells." I waited for a response, and there was none. "If it's true he is a mage of battle, I wish to fight him," I grinned. "Clear the yard."
"My pleasure, Lord Arcanist."
Canero smiled too, expecting this response. He knew it would curry favor with me. The Farstrider turned. Amplifying his voice, he called his orders.
"Clear the yard. Spectators to the ramparts."
His voice echoed beyond. As his tale had unfolded, the word and rumors had had time to circulate. Dozens of students were clamoring for a good spot to view the scene from the high walls. "An ingredients bag, fit for a battle mage, and get wards up to prevent him from fleeing." I turned to several masters in earshot. "Shields to protect the students, now!" The courtyard erupted in movement. Those without jobs were speaking excitedly. Dozens of workers made clear the crates and barrels. Students by the dozen more filed onto the walls. I was alone then in the middle of the yard with the cage. I stepped backward and pointed to the iron bars with both hands, then opened my arms wide. The cage disassembled itself, and its pieces rolled to the ramparts, where they would stack themselves neatly. A servant ran to me and handed me a bag. I thanked him and dismissed him. Now I approached my challenger. "Speak!" I kicked the prisoner's leg, rousing him from his meditation. I tossed the bag in front of him, then waved my hand to undo his warded fetters. At first, there was a guttural tone, followed then by a sing-song voice coming from the man. He spoke at length, as if he had been waiting permission to begin his oration. The words began coming to me, making sense as I grasped more and more of the vocabulary. The speech was disturbing. "From high the old ones quake, from low the beasts bay. Children of chaos, descendants of hell and Surtur, rise at the twilight of Grimnar and his ilk. He will come, yes, he will come, my master, to placate this land of the shattered and the scattered. My master, the unholy, the bond of seed and egg of those most evil named." The man with a cloth upon his head looked to me then. His eyes blackened, his lips blackened, streaks of black lightning forking across his facial features like a river. It was apparent to me that this man who spoke names not normally heard south of Scania was an agent of something far more sinister than the neutrality of our dark prophecy. At the time I was not keen on the plots of Gilruel nor her husband Cormal and their allies, but if I were, I would rate the two in separate leagues. "Silence your yammering. We will do battle for the pleasure of my students." I motioned to the bag on the ground. "Familiarize yourself with your ingredients. You may take the first shot." He fell silent as I spoke in his native tongue. I took flight as a raven, positioning myself some few dozen feet from the man as he vigorously explored the bag I had provided. I landed and turned to face him in my regular form then. My opponent turned sharply. He was speaking. "The prophecies remain false. An arrogant lie by an arrogant people. There will only be darkness after the light fades." His hands were flailing wildly, and they came together as if grasping a bundle of reeds. A ball of shadow, darker than the night, grew in his hands. He was looking at me then, black liquid leaking from his lips. He sent the orb rocketing toward me. Much of magical combat is similar to what I observed in watching a wrestling match. The two men must rely on technique as well as strength, planning their next moves as one plays chess. Practice leads to better execution, but the name of the game is resource management. If you use all of your physical energy on attempting to execute moves at inappropriate times, you will find yourself worn out and defenseless. Magic works in a similar regard. Thankfully, in this metaphor, I both have perfect technique, incredible strength, and strategic intellect. The black orb rotated toward me in a slanted orbit, dropping oozings of liquid that singed the stone ground. I stood, motionless, the ball colliding with a previously invisible blue shield of light energy. It was a magnificent show of sparks, and the crowd of students, masters, and servants cheered loudly. My hand came up, and I summoned in quick time a ball of fire, sending it along the same path the void energy had traveled. My foe was busy, firing from his palms micro-copies of the missile he had launched seconds ago. Smaller projectiles ate at my fireball, reducing its size before he crossed his arms, clapping his hands at his elbows, and summoning a gaping portal that resembled the open mouth of a person with a look of shock about them. The ball was consumed and the portal shut. I vanished from my location and reappeared some feet away, as another portal had opened above me, and emptied my fireball onto where I had just been seconds ago. Curious portal magic my foe employed. He had taken lessons from the Lord of the Void School of Magic, it seemed. Despite my thoughts following the observation, I did not stand idly by. I was running now, a torrent of lightning ejecting from my fingers and coursing toward my opponent. He spun the incoming lightning into a ball with both of his hands. Then it was spinning and collecting more from me, his other hand rising and deflecting other bolts with a small shield. He was sweating. I was cool. Energy bouncing from the shield in the foreigner's hand, cascaded off of the massive shields, protecting the spectators. The subsequent light show left those pupils cheering in awe. I continued my surge of lightning with one hand, using the other to shoot bolts of fire. I was running in the air now, as if up a flight of stairs. The fireballs were fast coming, and at a newly elevated angle the man was not quick enough. His shield absorbed a few, but strays bit into his extremities. I was not cheering yet, for he had a substantial blue-white sphere of electricity in his possession that could prove useful to me. I did mention strategy was involved, did I not? The man was still speaking. I could see his mouth moving as the bolts of fire and lightning illuminated his sour-looking face. I was high up, and he moved the barrel-sized ball of energy in front of him to absorb my fire missiles. The crowd was going wild, the yard lit up by this mass of light. My foe took a step back with one foot and hurled the orb at me. I was taken aback by the speed of the sphere. It rocketed in my direction, and I turned into a hawk, artificially enhancing my speed. I flew a few feet ahead of the ball, it pursuing me as I raced along the perimeter of the yard. I could see the faces of my subordinates and students clearly as I flapped by. They were drunk on excitement. As I rounded a corner, I saw that my opponent was controlling the missile with his hands. If I had had a mouth and not a beak, I would have grinned. My eyes glinted, and the stone ground around the man began to retract in some places, like waves receding to the ocean from the shore. The material collected and balled up, rising in size and revealing the dirt the pavement had been constructed upon. Little dwarf-shaped golems ran at the man then, assembling from the stone. My foe's face was that of horror. The stone dwarves grabbed at his hands. He fought them, but it was difficult with his concentration on guiding the orb of lightning. I had turned then, the ball of energy hot on my tail feathers. We were flying directly toward him. He knew what I was doing. His face said it all. The golems had his hands now. He had no control of his spawn. I flew ahead, my speed unnatural, as I was enhanced by my own magic power. I flew over my enemy, and turned to watch the ball of light sink lower in altitude. The man in the rags, with the cloth on his head, grew brighter, as the energy rocketed toward him, his face that of shock, as he was held in place by stone, that he had fought violently to free himself out of, but could not. With a tremendous noise and explosion, the crowd erupted in cheers, as the man was obliterated by his own creation. Blood and guts splattering on the stone yard, burned limbs bouncing off the spectator's shield. I landed then, returning to my true form, and bowing and waving to the cheers of my people. Their Lord Arcanist had easily dispatched this foreign wizard, known in far lands for his battle prowess. Dueling was not completely gone from Alfheim culture, but it was rare it ended in such a shower of death like what had happened that night. Typically the losing mage surrendered, or was spared. I broke from that tradition upon hearing the ramblings of the man. How one from so far away could know tales and prophecy from our waters, I did not know. I didn't like it, and while he drew breath I was not comfortable. Word of the duel was the talk of the college in Greater Alfheim for some time. It was not just a testament of skills to multicast as I had, but it was a good show. It was certain that Gilruel had heard. It was certain she was thinking of that duel as she plotted ways to slow down my quest now. Back in the present, we drove for an hour more as everyone collected their thoughts in silence. Sylvia and Caleb napped, the quiet benefiting me. I was enjoying the awesome views accorded, flat-topped mountains, gaping canyons, and horizons unobstructed by trees for many leagues were the norm. Most roads in what is now called the ancient world by this civilization are named for something or someone. Naming a road is of great significance, as it acts as an arbiter of history, through seriously consequential events like troop movements to everyday activities like driving commerce and travel. As such, it is a matter of projecting power to name a road for a king. The road is long, it requires upkeep, the king keeps it. He allows the use of it to drive daily life. Other roads, I have marveled at, were created and kept by whole people, and thus named for cultural or geographic significance. Such was my confusion in finding out that this great road we were traveling upon is referred to simply as Interstate 17. Given a look at the map, I estimated the length of the road at an impressive 150 miles. Beginning in the middle of Phoenix, it terminated in Flagstaff, where I was informed a large mountain was present. In the coming hour, we would progress past Black Canyon City, Bumblebee, and Camp Verde. Impressive. This journey would have taken some time by foot or horse, less so by wing, but this vehicle proved quickest. Not too much later, we stopped at a designated facility constructed for the sole purpose of urination and defecation. I took the opportunity to look down the road ahead. I was pondering the building of such a place. Why not dig a trench or use a naturally occurring canyon? How many traveled this road? Had they tried a canyon and it filled up? Surely not. Unless... I scanned the horizon, looking for a swarm of carrion or flies. None. I spotted something else, however. A windmill across the road from a rectangular building. I dug through my bag, grasping an eyeball of the hawk corpse. It was mushy and rotted, but it would serve. It winked from existence, my vision sharpening intensely. It was the same windmill, the same tavern, the parking lot barren, but for a few cars. "What are you looking at?" Silver was at my side. I was startled. "The majesty," I blurted, "of this rich landscape," my hand outstretched, referencing the mountains in the distance. "Why does it sound like you're lying?" She arched an eyebrow. "Well, young Silver, if only you could read minds." I smiled and returned to my position in the motor vehicle. Shortly we were back on the highway. I pondered if we should stop at the tavern. It would expose us to risk. Had Gilruel really been there? Had she set a trap? Undoubtedly. It was not uncommon for masters and seeresses to collide in the dreamscape. That truly could have been Gilruel I saw, or just an apparition of my anxieties given the weight of responsibility I shouldered. I had to stop there. I had to know. My curiosity might prove to be my death. Kyle, it appears I must defecate once more. I played at stomach pain, gripping my abdomen. Truly, my bowels protest. I made myself appear pale. Oh, yeah, Kyle, he's definitely got the poops. He looks like a ghost, Caleb confirmed. I don't know when the next stop is. We literally just left one. There's a bar or something. Sean pointed to a sign for Rowdy Ron's. Sylvia just glanced back at me from the frontmost passenger seat, her gaze that of narrowed-eyed circumspection. That's perfect, Sean. A fine place for me to lay my bum in agony. I congratulated his falling into my deception. We turned off the highway and onto a smaller road, in the parking lot as I remembered it. An electronic red sign spelled out Rowdy Ron's. A pair of double doors with blacked-out round windows sat still. I shan't be long. I evacuated myself from the vehicle, and to my surprise all the doors of the Suburban opened and closed. I turned and faced my troop. It's fine, I can handle a trip to the bathroom. I don't know, we're getting kind of close to Sedona, Sean said. I have a bad feeling too, Caleb spoke next. Well, come, we'll dispel our bad feelings together. With the toilet, I smiled and encouraged. We entered the tavern together, all five of us. I cringed as the room filled my vision, but relaxed immediately. There was no blood. A man stood behind the bar with his back turned, polishing glass mugs for mead. Another was seen beyond, moving about what must have been the kitchen. Welcome to Rowdy Ron's, be right with you, the man polishing the mugs announced. Satisfied, I turned to leave, but remembered my ruse. I had to at least fake a trip to the bathroom. I found the symbol of a man that the society used to indicate the room for passing stool and made for it. As I entered, I felt something pulling at the back of my neck. Like an instinct, I could imagine it to be the feeling a mother, human or animal, has when danger is imminent and her children are present. I felt motherly intuition. My children, rather my young adult subordinates, were nearly at the counter to order food or drinks or whatever, and the man still had not turned. Why not? I channeled my vision. Detecting magic, the man behind the counter was glowing, bright. How can I serve you? He turned. Actually, how can you serve her? He lunged over the counter at the kids, grabbing up Sean in two hands. The man who we did not know was Henry had eyes as black as night. Sean screamed then, and so did Caleb. Sylvia was on her flank, backing up as quick as she could, mouth agape. Kyle was fast. He wound up and punched Henry in the face, hard, once, and when the black-eyed man didn't release Sean, twice, 3, then 4, I raised my hand to blast the mind slave with a bolt of energy when the bathroom door behind me exploded outward, and I was thrown. A massive man, at least 6'1.5", roared into the room like a bull. He took me up in his massive arms, and was about to break me, when I instinctively let cast the same spell I had used on that fat hermit so long ago. The large man, whom I did not know was Ed, was sent flying through the air back into the bathroom. I heard the sound of smashing tile and the cracking of porcelain, as his combined weight behind the force of the spell demolished the defecation chamber. I turned. Out from the door to the kitchen came the third man, who was after Seaman now. Henry had vaulted the counter, and was in a standing wrestling match with Kyle. I reared to blast him when the bathroom door swung on its hinges once more. Ed was back. He was more than a mind slave. His skin was becoming dark gray, his veins black and distended. His mouth opened, and he heaved his breath, a black bile-like spit flecking from gray-green teeth. Defend yourselves. I must focus on the beast. While I courted the mammoth man, Sylvia stood. She had the hilt of her sword out and swung it wide to extend the blade from within. She stepped forward, and Kyle read in her eyes an expression of what she meant to do. Caleb stood, screaming, motionless. Kyle grabbed his attacker's wrists, freeing himself from the man's grasp and falling to the wayside. Sylvia swept Henry's legs with the sword, cutting them cleanly from his body. There was a sickening thud as the legless torso smacked into the wood floor. Blood squirted from the stumps as the arteries had been severed. I focused on the giant man. He was the champion of Gilruel, and thus would absorb most of the damage of my attacks. I would need to keep him from the group. "Get to the Suburban!" I yelled. "Leave a window open!" I transformed into a bird, flapping vigorously toward a broken, blacked-out window. I could hear Ed breathing behind me. What I couldn't see were his fingertips, inches from my tail feathers, as he sprinted after me. I was outside then, and leading him on a chase around the building. I wanted to fly up and away, but I knew that the beast would run back inside and kill Sean or Sylvia, or either of their friends. We would see now if their training was paying off. I flew around the building, flapping as fast as my tiny wings could. I flew over every obstacle I could find, which in the back of the tavern was many. Boxes, trash bins, a covered motorized bicycle. Ed either vaulted the objects or kicked them aside. I rounded the building. Everyone was in the Suburban, barring Kyle, who struggled against the kitchen man's grasp. I was still a few yards away, but I was close enough to use telepathy to explode the mind-slave's head, my little dove eyes glowing, the man's head turning red, then rapidly expanding before bursting. "What?" Kyle screamed, covered in blood, brain, and chunks of bone. His hesitation would have caused his death, had I not expected it. I transformed mid-flight into my regular form, and tumbled, rolled, and turned to face the charging Ed. I let loose a piece of string, and Ed froze in time. "The car! Start driving!" I ordered, then seamlessly mid-stride transformed into a bird again. I was pleased to see the now moving Suburban had roared to life and was speeding toward the highway. Someone had indeed remembered to roll a window down, and I soared inside, returning once more to my normal state. "I chopped someone's legs off!" Everyone in the vehicle was screaming. "Oh my gosh, I'm going to jail!" "His head! It just exploded! What did that? Who shot him?" Kyle's eyes were crazed. Sean was crying loudly, Caleb rocking back and forth, wide-eyed and babbling. "That, my friends," I breathed out loudly, "was Skyrim." There was a second of quiet, before another eruption of yelling. "Skyrim? This isn't a video game. This is real life, jerk. He's dead. How could you guys run so fast? Did you see their eyes? I'm going to have PTSD. The words came so fast, I was unsure who had said what. "You all did very, very well. Till 2 of Gilruel's for none of mine." I was surprised. I did not suspect such a soft society could have given me 4 underlings that would have performed so admirably, so I told them as much. "How did the zombie's head explode?" Sylvia asked, looking at Kyle, then grabbing paper napkins from a cup holder and wiping the debris from his face. "Telepathy. I made all the blood in his body pump into his brain," I said. "Sylv, you chopped that guy's legs off. Caleb, you chopped his head off." Sean was shaking in body and voice. "Children, I know you are all racked with guilt over the loss of human life, which is quite shocking to me, honestly, but I needed to remind you that those men were not men any longer. I had watched people in the society obsess over violence. It was on their games, their television shows, in the books I had flipped through, on their clothing. Yet see it in person and everyone cries. In Alfheim, people pursued peaceful hobbies like painting, stitching, and woodworking. Come now, Caleb." I wrapped my arm around his shoulder and gripped his flesh with my hand. "Cheer up, you did the right thing." I manipulated his mind just somewhat, flooding his head with warm feelings. It was subtle, not mind control, just mind influence. "Well, at least we don't have to see the big guy anymore." Sean's voice was steady now. "No, we will see him again," I said. "What do you mean?" from Caleb. "That was Gilruel's champion slave. She can summon him to her over time and space. A trick only known to her and few other casters. Quite advanced, requiring a lot of preparation." "What kind of preparation?" Kyle asked, his eyes never moving from the road ahead. "A series of dark magic uses blood as her primary ingredient. The more powerful the mind of the individual the blood came from, the more powerful the magic that can be cast. The blood of masters would create the strongest spells. That said, those of the strongest willpower cannot become mind slaves, so instead they are harvested. She may take a book, any book, and make it into a tome of the dead, her own artifact of power multiplication. It takes some meditating on, but a witch of her ability could create one in less than a day. Destroying it would severely weaken her." "How do we destroy it?" Kyle asked. "What do you mean, we?" Sean asked. I was enjoying Kyle's initiative and curiosity. "Here," I reached into my ingredients bag and dug out a blunted knife. I was told it was for spreading butter. "I'll bless this knife to do the job. Just in case we come across her tome, open it to a random page and stab and hold." I concentrated, consecrating the blade. "Is that one of my mom's butter knives?" Sylvia asked. "Perhaps," I replied.